In the early hours last Sunday morning, the Tennessee Highway Patrol and ICE agents descended on Nashville's predominantly Latino neighborhoods, making as many as 150 traffic stops and busing an unknown number of people to immigration detention centers in Louisiana. The sudden and sweeping action set off alarm bells for a community that, up to that point, was merely waiting and wondering when. When will they come for me?
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
Our Nashville Banner reporters have been out covering the ongoing operation over the past week, from staking out the ICE field office overnight to tagging along with a council member, following leads to try to actually witness an ICE arrest. In this episode, we'll bring you up to speed on Nashville's ICE raids and how the coordinated enforcement actions have rippled across our entire community. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. It's Banner and Company.
All right, so we're out here. It's 1:15 Friday afternoon at the Department of Homeland Security ICE field office off of Brick Church Park Drive. This is the same place where a lot of folks were gathered last weekend after the initial ICE and Tennessee Highway Patrol operation detained a bunch of folks. This building, this nondescript brick building, I don't think you would know what this building is if you didn't notice the white Department of Homeland Security SUVs that are parked out front. And we've just been sitting here waiting to see if there's anyone in there. And the attorney showed up a little while ago and went in, asked to see anyone they were holding, and was told that they don't have anyone in detention in there right now. So we don't know what to make of that because ICE and the THP have not been super transparent or public about what's going on. It's just very strange how some kind of normal things have been happening at this building in the midst of this whole kind of week of operations and detentions and protests and stuff. The other morning I was over here, there was a landscaping crew cutting the grass around the outside of the ICE building. And today, an Amazon van pulled in there.
Yeah, I saw your post about that.
I mean, it's a little bizarre. Now we have an ambulance with sirens on coming up here. There was a guy that drove out, came out of the gated parking lot, drove out with his iPhone out the window, recording me as he drove by. All right, it's around 2:20 in the afternoon on Friday. I'm here with our photographer, Martin Cherry. We just met a man who was released this afternoon from ICE custody, I suppose. He walked out of the ICE field office here into the parking lot. We're parked on the side of the street here outside the building. He did not speak any English. We were able to communicate a little bit using a iPhone translation, and we were able to confirm at least that he had been detained and he had just been released. He pointed us to his ankle monitor, and then a few minutes later a woman came to pick him up. We talked to her briefly. She did speak English. So at least one person this afternoon was in custody and has been released. We weren't able to get the details from him about what happened and kind of the circumstances under which he was taken into custody. Yeah, there's people in there. So just before 2:30 here, a unmarked white van pulled out of the ICE field office. We could see people seated in the back of the van. Obviously, could not tell whether those people were people who had been detained. It seems possible that they were. This is an unmarked white van. Kind of looked like a transit vehicle, but we don't know the status of those folks inside. It was followed by 7 other cars, a couple of them marked DHS vehicles, most of them not. And they left the office park here and headed out for the main road. I'm Steven Hale with the Nashville Banner. This is Martin, our photographer. Do you mind if I record us talking for a minute? So you were out here Sunday.
I got here late in the afternoon, around 2:30.
Yeah. What brought you out here that day?
Because I'm just extremely, I've been anticipating this from ICE, wondering, and I have friends that are Latino and neighbors that are, and I've worried about them, and I thought it's going to come, maybe not to Nashville, but it did. And as soon as I saw that, I came on. And I got here, like I said, maybe around 3, and was here for about an hour. And this whole area, I saw the woman screaming when her husband was carried off, and they had a baby, and I took a lot of video, but I went ahead and posted mine on social media because I felt like our neighborhood needed to know what was going on in our neighborhood. I live in Whites Creek. It's not very far. It's a horrible affront to their constitutional rights. It's a horrible affront to humanity. It's inhumane to be disappeared. I just, for a whole 6 days, I just can't let it go. What I saw, the images, the screaming, the crying, the babies, the children, it was traumatic. So it took me a couple of days, and I can't let it go. I can't let it go.
You came out here today just to see if anything else was happening.
This is the only facility in Nashville, correct? This is
only
the
Department of Homeland Security ICE kind of field office here,
office.
yes.
That's what I thought.
That's my understanding.
I couldn't believe I was 10, 15 minutes away from my house.
Right. Well, and I don't know. It's very, there's no markings on it.
Yeah, I was like, when did this get built? I'm going to go and look that up because I know how to. I should have been a private eye in my former life.
Oh, well, maybe. You're just coming out here to stake out the place.
I am. That's just the way I am. I'm just looking out for my neighborhood. And then I'm going to go home and print out some information to give to my Latino neighbors, because I've got 2 neighbors that are Hispanic and have lived there for 20 years, as well as I have. I need to know their rights. And as a community person, it feels like I just feel like that's the only thing I can do. I feel so helpless.
Mind if I ask your name? I don't have to include your name if you'd rather
it's
me
Lisa
not.
Proctor.
Lisa Proctor. And
yeah, I don't mind if you do it because I'm not afraid. I'm white. I was born here, but I'm a descendant of immigrants. We all are. If you're not 100% Native American, you're an immigrant. A family member of an immigrant.
You're listening to Banner and Company from the Nashville Banner. And that was a dispatch from reporter Steven Hale, who spent the day with our photographer, Martin Cherry, outside the Nashville ICE field office. And with me now is Banner reporter Sarah Grace Taylor. Sarah, you actually camped out outside that ICE field office in your car. Did you at least have a pillow?
No, I was trying not to fall asleep. So I stayed up the whole time.
What did you see? What were you looking for?
So I went out around 10 o'clock Thursday night looking to see how many THP troopers and how many unmarked ICE officers really were going out each night that they were doing this operation. So I started on Murfreesboro Road at a THP office to see them leave. Then I went up and down Harding and Nolensville and some of these roads that we knew the stops had been happening. Didn't see a lot of activity in the first couple of hours. And then by about midnight, went over to ICE to see if we could get an idea how many people were detained, how many people were brought in, how many people were let go the next morning.
Of course, the THP cars were marked. The ICE cars, I'm assuming, were not. Was it pretty easy to tell who was who?
Yeah, in most cases, you would see a trooper go ahead and then usually 2 unmarked cars behind them. The cars varied a lot, so it's SUVs and Chargers and things you've seen as unmarked before, but also things like Subaru Outbacks and a Kia Soul. So it would be hard to identify them if you just saw one of those cars.
We heard Steven Hale talk about someone, maybe an ICE agent, actually recording him. What interactions did you have? Was anyone recording you?
Yeah, so where I parked and then Steven came and parked in the same spot when I left is right at it's across the street from the mouth of the entrance to their driveway. They wouldn't let me go in the driveway last night. So every time an officer or an agent pulled in or out, we pretty much made eye contact. There was a couple people who revved their engines, mad that I had a camera sticking out of the door. There was a guy who gave me the middle finger. There was a lady who did a U-turn to come and record out of the passenger side, sticking her phone virtually in my window.
You started covering all of this last weekend when it all began. And for those who may not have been following all along, tell us what you saw at the same ICE office last Sunday when it all started.
So last Sunday morning, people got word that those who were detained had made it over to this ICE field office off of Brick Church Pike. And so there was a small protest that started, and these community organizations that help immigrants were out there to do a press conference. And so when I got there, one charter bus had already left with an unknown number of people. We later learned they were headed for Louisiana for detention centers. And then the protest kind of continued, and they ultimately slowed down and temporarily stopped a second bus that was leaving with, again, we don't know how many people inside.
Those buses were like customized. You couldn't see in them, right?
Right. So I walked up at one point to where they had the bus parked, which was like behind where protesters and people were and behind like a wrought iron fence. And in the front, you could see someone who was maybe in a security officer kind of position, and then a driver, and then behind them, like a lock gate, like you'd see in a prison van or something where you can't see who's behind them. And then I went around the side, and the windows were too tinted to see in it to even know if there were people sitting in the bus. And we found out that the bus that the protesters interacted with left empty during the protest, but then came back later, and that's when they picked up the second round of detainees and actually took them away.
How close did people get to get imagery, photos, video? Witnesses, the protesters, and so forth.
Yeah, people were touching the bus. So one protester was sitting on the bumper at one point and had stopped it in its tracks. So
was that person threatened with arrest?
No, eventually, so not ICE, but Department of Homeland Security police were on site because they protect federal buildings. So they were lax the first time when the bus left empty, and then when they came back, they had about 12 people in tactical vests surrounding the bus and kept people at an arm's length when they actually left with people inside. So the second time around, they were a little more protective, and throughout the week, we saw them get so protective that, like I said, I couldn't even enter the parking lot.
Earlier, you talked about how you could tell who was who in terms of law enforcement. Did any of the videos reveal anything else to you?
The videos that I saw from people who were out the first night, heard this was happening, and went out to try to see what was going on and sent some cell phone videos. It showed some really quick stops where they let people go quickly, presumably because they were able to prove their citizenship. And then it showed, again, that sequence of a really quick THP interaction that likely didn't result in anything, and then a quick handover to ICE. So you see THP more or less just facilitating the feds versus doing any tangible traffic enforcement in most of these cases.
Did you see our Metro Police?
Yeah, so when I got to the ICE office on Sunday, there were 4 or 5 Metro Police cars actually leaving right when I got there. And before I got there, there had been a helicopter overhead, and one of these videos showed 3 Metro police stopping someone on the side of the road the same night, which led to some confusion over whether Metro had been involved.
Yeah, there have been a lot of questions over Metro Police and their possible involvement, even as the force and Mayor O'Connell claim there was no police involvement. So we'll get into that after a short break. It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kalodimos, and we'll be right back.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
I've been talking with Banner reporter Sarah Grace Taylor, who was on scene last Sunday as dozens of Nashvillians were bussed out to immigration detention centers. I'd like to bring in our Metro reporter, Stephen Elliott, right now. On Sunday, Stephen, Mayor O'Connell claimed that there was no police involvement in the weekend's ICE sweeps. And you spent the week kind of following up on that piece of the story. What have you learned since?
That claim has remained all the way through Friday when Chief Drake joined the mayor at a press conference. What happened, according to the mayor's office and Metro Legal Director Wally Dietz, is that a federal official called Metro Dispatch, which is a separate entity from Metro Police, on Thursday. It was about 48 hours before arrests began, and said, hey, can we get some extra patrols on Sunday morning? Because we think there might be some families that are upset by what the operations we're going to be doing this weekend. The dispatcher took that information down. The call was recorded. Apparently, that dispatcher logged that in some sort of automated system so that whoever was on duty on Sunday morning would get an alert to tell Metro Police to go by and check the situation out and make sure that everything was okay.
Was the call pretty ambiguous, like we just need some help?
The caller was clear that he was calling on behalf of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. Okay. He himself did not work for ICE. He worked for Homeland Security's Protective Service, which protects the building. And the dispatcher who answered the call, it wasn't clear that this person fully understood what agency he was calling on behalf of.
That was just a random 911 dispatcher answering the phone?
It was, but one thing interesting that we learned on Wednesday at the special council committee meeting is that the number this federal agent called was a special number for Metro Police. The federal agent said he was a former Metro officer, so apparently he had this private number. So I think the dispatcher knew that it was law enforcement in some way, and so it was a little more familiar of a conversation than it would be if you or I called.
Yeah, you talked about that 3+ hour public meeting that happened on Wednesday. It looked to me from the video and the photos that I saw that people were not exactly happy with the answers they were getting that night.
No, it was pretty intense. There was a lot of heckling of the city officials who were speaking, which included a representative from the police. Chief Drake was not there, but one of his deputies who deals with the council was there. And Wally Dietz, who's the legal director for the city, was there. And the head of the Department of Emergency Communications, Steve Martini, was there. The community members and the council members who were there both had a lot of the same concerns. There were a lot of them, but they were bewildered that Metro Police would have been unaware that this was going on. If there were 100 or more stops in one part of town, how could the police not have noticed? Which is the claim even to this day, that they did not know it was happening. They were also skeptical of the claim that Metro didn't know, especially when the recording of the dispatch call was played. People in the crowd yelled out, "You knew." It was sort of almost a cinematic moment because at least one person in Metro clearly did know. And also they wanted to know, what could Metro have done differently? What will Metro do going forward?
And from just a policy standpoint, wasn't there some sort of executive order in place that when these kind of requests come from the feds that it needs to go up the chain of command?
Yes, and this is an executive order that I believe predates Mayor O'Connell's tenure that he reinstated when he came into office. And what it says is that if a Metro department is contacted by federal immigration authorities, they are to alert the mayor's office within 3 business days. And council members cited that during the questioning, and Steve Martini of the dispatch office admitted that they had messed that up. It's a little unclear if they were within the 3 business days, but on Friday, the mayor updated that policy, and now it's within 1 day that Metro Department will have to alert the mayor's office.
Certain council members have been pretty active since. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Sandra Sepulveda, who represents part of that area where many of these arrests have happened, she's been one of the most vocal council members on this issue, and she's been going out, she's been live streaming herself, driving around town. On Thursday, she was driving around following what appeared to be one of these vans that the feds are using, and the driving looked pretty aggressive on the agent's behalf. And I've been talking to her all week and been wanting to check out what was going on. And so on Friday morning, I went out with her early before the sun came up, and we drove around all over that part of town for 3 hours. And I've described it as kind of a game of whack-a-mole. She would get a message from one of these groups, or she was plugged into the Nashville Noticias live stream, and they were receiving live calls and saying, oh, you got to check out this area, you got to check out this area. So we were driving all over, and by the time we would arrive, there would be no one there. And then in one case, we got to Geodis Park, where there was a report of a bunch of law enforcement gathered, and Councilmember Sepulveda ended up going and talking to them, and they were Metro Police who were working at the Vanderbilt commencement ceremonies, which were at the park.
Did anything become clearer when the mayor had his weekly press briefing?
One question I had for the mayor at the press briefing on Friday was, if this process had worked where you were alerted ahead of time, what could you have done? What would you have done? And the answer is still a little unclear. What he did say is that he and the police department and some of the other Metro departments could have been a little more prepared so that on Sunday they weren't completely taken by surprise. But I did ask, could you have alerted the community? Because I think that is what some people are asking for. And he let Wally Dietz, the city's top lawyer, answer that on his behalf. But essentially what Wally Dietz said was that would potentially be exposing city officials to criminal liability. And so they're still looking into whether informing the public of an impending federal law enforcement operation would be considered interfering in that. But they seemed to think that it would expose them to being arrested.
What questions are you left with? And I'm sure there are many.
One that I brought up a few minutes ago is, how did MNPD not know that this was going on the street? Because it was in a concentrated geographic area, and it was a high volume of arrests. And you'd think if MNPD patrollers were out on the streets, they would have noticed a major uptick in the number of people being pulled over, and they would have said, hey, what's going on? Apparently that didn't happen. Another question I have is, what happens next time this happens? From what we understand, this is coming to a conclusion, at least at this scale. But that's not to say that months down the road it couldn't happen again. And so what will Metro have in place next time? And then another question is, we filed several records requests, and the city has also filed records requests. I think the biggest question is who was detained. We still don't know that, at least as of Friday. And what were they charged with, and what's their, if they have a criminal background, as the federal and state authorities have said, what is it? Can we verify it? So I think who we're talking about is my biggest remaining question.
It's Banner and Company. My guests are Nashville Banner reporters Stephen Elliott and Sarah Grace Taylor. We'll be right back. As of Friday, you were hearing from multiple sources that these raids would wrap up over the weekend. Obviously, time will tell if that's the case. But you also got more details from ICE and THP about the arrests and detentions. And am I hearing this number correct? There were 500 traffic stops over the course of this week?
Yeah, and in talking to immigration groups, they've never seen anything like this. You know, you've seen stings at apartment complexes or at someone's employer, but we've never seen sweeping traffic stops like this.
On the open road.
Right.
So what did they tell you?
As of Thursday morning, THP says that there were, I think, around 460 traffic stops total. So that's the first 5 nights that we know of this operation. Out of that, ICE made 94 arrests. So these are arrests related to someone's immigration status done at the federal level, not by the state. THP had made around a dozen arrests for different things, like someone having a warrant or a DUI that was found in the course of these traffic stops. And ICE is saying that a small handful of their arrests, I think only 2 specific examples have been given, were violent criminals who were allegedly immigrants with ties to different gangs. We haven't gotten their names or any details to confirm that. And even in that case, that's a relatively small number of the arrests, which is a relatively small number of the people stopped in this time frame. And we know that those numbers are as of Thursday morning, so whatever happened Thursday night and Friday night aren't included in that.
Now, one of the challenges of this operation is that it happened so quickly and with a lot of unpredictability and a lack of transparency. So I understand that immigration lawyers and advocates have been scrambling, really, to help people affected. What are the lawyers doing and what can they do?
Yeah, so starting Sunday morning, when the first batch of people were being held at the ICE facility in Nashville, attorneys have had an issue getting a full list of who all has been detained. As of Thursday, groups knew the identities of 62 of 94 people. But earlier in the week, it was worse than that. And we know that the ICE tracking system lags, so they've been having to wait up to 24 hours to figure out if someone's been detained. Once they do, they were having a hard time getting in to see people who they might represent. And in many cases, people were not reaching out to or even being told that they could talk to an attorney till they were already in Louisiana. So what the attorneys are doing now is looking at if due process was followed both in the stops. It's hard to think that there were 500 legitimate traffic stops in this time frame. And then also figuring out if due process is being followed in terms of when attorneys are getting to speak to potential clients and their clients who might be faced with really consequential immigration decisions like self-deporting before they get a chance to talk to an attorney.
And I'm assuming that in-car cameras and body camera footage will be available at some point to scrutinize these stops?
Yeah, so we've put in quite a few records requests, and I know that organizations who do this work have as well. So at some point we'll have a better idea.
Yeah. A few fundraising efforts cropped up last week, and they're ongoing. One I know is organized by Remix Tennessee, another by the Community Foundation. So the last you checked, Sarah, how much had the Community Foundation raised, and what is that money going toward?
As of Thursday, that fund had raised $200,000. So that money is going toward people who are affected by these raids this week specifically. And it's mutual aid, so things like paying for rent or child support.
Well, it's hard to fully measure the impact of something like this, but we know that the people detained were, I should say, are members of our community. They've got jobs and families. Sarah, you got connected with a woman named Andrea, whose mother was detained over the weekend in that first sweep. She explained how her mom was detained. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so Andrea is a 25-year-old, and her mom, who's been in Nashville for something like 30 years, was coming home from work around 10 p.m. on Saturday, the first night that they were doing this, and she says that she was followed from Bell Road in Antioch into her apartment complex, where she was pulled over by THP in front of the leasing office. At some point during this interaction, Andrea ends up on the phone with her mom, and her mom says that they were never even given a reason for the stop. Her mom is detained by ICE right there and spends the night in the Nashville field office for ICE. And Andrea, meanwhile, is looking at Davidson County arrest records and ICE and trying to figure out where her mom is, only to find out the next morning that her mom would be going to Louisiana on one of those buses that we talked about.
I know that Andrea and many others have raised the issue of racial profiling. What's her argument there?
So Andrea and her mom, like I said, don't have a reason to point to for why her mom was pulled over. Mm-hmm. They say there was no traffic violation, no good reason for THP to have followed her into the apartment and pulled her over. I spoke to a man Friday morning who was ultimately released from the ICE facility for medical reasons, and he also said that he was pulled over off of Bell Road into a different apartment complex. And when he was pulled over, he was told it was because he didn't have a light over his license plate. So he and Andrea both say point blank that they think this is racial profiling. And then community organizations like the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition have said very frankly that they think it's racial profiling, in part because of the volume of stops. Again, it's hard to imagine in one night 150 stops that were legitimate traffic stops in this one area.
Right. So what kind of lady is Andrea's mom?
So Andrea's mom is a chef and has been in Nashville for decades and likes to read and likes to go on walks and has a close group of friends and is close to her daughter. And also, I think, like her daughter proved to be when we talked, her mom is strong. And so her mom, while in detention in Louisiana, we know has been helping identify who else is down there and get that information back to groups in Nashville that need to know. We know that she's been helping people with their commissary down there. And she was trying to calm Andrea down even the day that we talked. I think she's, like a lot of women in their communities, just a backbone and willing to help people, even when she herself is in a situation I can't imagine.
The story that you wrote about Andrea, as I was reading it, I was really struck by the fact that in the interview, she was talking about her mother in the past tense. That was sad.
Yeah, so when I'm talking to Andrea, we're in her mom's now vacant apartment, and Andrea is very matter of fact and is very down to business and trying to read out of her spiral notebook where she's written all the things she wants to say, and she is not emotional at all for most of the interview, which is hard to imagine in a position like this. But it's been a couple of days, and she's kind of mission control for her family dealing with this, so she's trying to be, I think, resilient through it. But at one point I'm asking her about her mom, who she has a very close relationship with. They see each other every Tuesday. They had recently gone to a winery together in these matching sundresses that Andrea is wearing, and as she's describing her mom's characteristics, she kept saying she was generous, she was loved by her neighbors. And so I realized Andrea was talking about her mom in the past tense, and I asked her, why are you doing that? Is there some sense of already grieving your mom? And that's where Andrea started to cry and shared that she felt it was unlikely that her mom came home, and that she was, in a sense, already mourning that her mom was lost.
You and I both know it's tough to sit across from someone who's getting emotional, who's in crisis and feeling strong feelings without some of that rubbing off on you. Did it?
Yeah. I teared up while Andrea was talking about that part, and I think I can only think of 3 other times in doing journalism that's happened. But I think regardless of what you think about immigration stops or what policy around this needs to be, it's really hard to see someone who's that deeply affected by something that happened so suddenly to their family.
And Andrea left you with sort of an image of what had happened, not only to her family, but to the Nashville community at large.
Yeah, so we spoke to people this week who we know have seen their businesses become more vacant in Nashville's Latino neighborhoods. We've seen people who aren't going to work because they're scared to get pulled over. There's a lot of ripple effect that happens when you take someone out of a community. Beyond the immediate impacts that this kind of thing has on someone's family, Andrea said that every detainment affects other people in this community. She said one person affects an entire web of people, an entire community. You take one person and it destroys the web.
Sarah Grace Taylor, Stephen Elliott, Steven Hale, and Martin Cherry, among others, on the Banner staff, thank you for telling this story. Banner & Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. This episode was produced, edited, and mixed by Andrea Tudhope. Original music is by Verlin Thompson. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and head to NashvilleBanner.com to read our ongoing coverage of the ICE operation in and around Nashville.